Hey you guys, welcome back. I wanted to do a very brief video which stemmed off of one of my other videos. So I did one video previously on murmurs to kind of help you guys break it down and how to easily assess and identify specific systolic and diastolic murmurs um, on boards quickly. So just some quick tips on if you see certain descriptions in the question style, how that you can quickly identify which is which, right? And someone asked about mitral valve prolapse, and I did not include that in my murmur video. And sometimes people get confused with it. So I wanted to do a separate one to answer that question and help those who also have questions on mitral valve prolapse. Now, y'all know cardiology is my background and we can go so deep into this, but this is for board purposes. Um, I know we do certain things so differently based off of patient by patient, but this is so you can answer questions quickly and get them correct quickly on exams as well as boards, right? So before I get into that, y'all know I like to give my disclaimer. So for those of you who are familiar with me, hey you guys, those of you who are new here, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Dr. Brittany Weinstock. I am a family nurse practitioner. I am the founder and CEO of the Nursing Studio, and I create videos, content, different resources, classes, etc., to help nurses and nurse practitioners be successful on boards as well as in practice. I always like to give a disclaimer before I get into it because the more and more people see this, sometimes we have different questions, different practices, etc. And I know that. We all know that, right? We know in medicine, we treat on a patient by patient basis. There's no absolutes. So let's treat this material as such. I am going to provide you with the guidelines that are going to help you be successful on boards. You know, there are certain delays. I just did a recent video that's telling you on the updated guidelines that are on the exams right now with the new test that was just released. You know, AANP was recently released. And then I went over the one for the blueprint for ANCC as well. I go by when I'm telling y'all that I'm preparing you for boards. I will say that in the video so that you know that this is what this is for. And I give you the guidelines they are currently testing on. When something new has come out, I let you know. Okay. If we're talking practice, I'm going to tell you practice because sometimes there may be a slight variance because the test might not be up to date as far as something that might be released currently. Okay. So follow me on that and know that I'm going to continue to deliver the things that we are currently testing on or practicing on. And I will tell you each time before I get into it. But anyway, you guys, let's get into this really quickly so that I can kind of help you get the mitral valve prolapse. Okay. All right, so murmurs, you know, when I tell you about murmurs, I always say know the location as well as be familiar with its systolic versus diastolic, right? Because if you can first identify one, is if it's systolic or diastolic, know that first, right? And then if you do that, you move on to the location, right? You're going to understand which murmur we're talking about each time. So when you're on boards, they're going to provide you with this information. It's going to say, you know, it's a systolic murmur, it's a diastolic murmur, etc. So that's our first ball part, right? So I always tell you guys, and I will add my murmurs video into the description as well, so y'all can take a look at that if you need to go back and look at all the other ones that I go over. But you know, I always say there are tons of mnemonics for murmurs. Use whichever one that you know and works best for you. Don't try to sit over here and think of all of them because it's just going to be overwhelming for no apparent reason. Do make it easy, right? And so the one that I have, my you know my saying, Brittany's brilliance for all of my mnemonics and different things and sayings and craziness. But mine that I use in my book and review courses, I say sassy systolic. Men really are stupid, right? So men really, mitral regurgitation, right? Are stupid, aortic stenosis. And then the diastolic ones are the opposite, right? So diastolic would be the opposite, being mitral stenosis and then aortic regurgitation. So someone asked, what about mitral valve prolapse, right? Great question, excellent question. Mitral valve prolapse also falls under those systolic murmurs. Okay? So you can say we gave that the men the MVP award for really being stupid. Okay, men really are stupid. MVP systolic. That's what the sassy systolic girls say. So MVP being mitral valve prolapse, understanding that those mitral valve, it basically just separates the two chambers on that left side of the heart, right? Okay, and we know when we think of the valves are like gates, is the way that I picture it. Those little valves, those little flaps, are like the gate for the blood flow, right? So think about our terminology. So that valve is prolapsed. So what's happening is when your heart beats, it's beginning to bulge, so to speak, because every time the blood flow comes through that contraction, it is causing that valve to prolapse. It's causing it to bulge. Now, this can lead to mitral regurgitation if that blood flow begins to come backwards. If it begins to regurgitate through that valve, that's mitral regurgitation, still that systolic murmur, right? So the mitral valve prolapse leads to that. It can lead to that. But the way I want you to be able to identify the difference is because typically I'm telling you systolic versus diastolic, right? So you know that. So we know mitral valve prolapse is a systolic murmur, right? Got it. So if the question says systolic, we're going to start thinking those three: mitral regurg, aortic stenosis, MVP. Cool, got it. All right, now where is it located? So it's either going to tell you, think about the location, because we're thinking mitral, aortic for testing purposes. We know that there's more, but for testing purposes, thinking mitral, aortic, right? So mitral being at the what? Fifth intercostal space, or it may say apex, right? Whereas aortic is at the second intercostal space, and it is at the base of the heart, right? So in the question, if they're talking about mitral valve prolapse, it'll say systolic. It's either going to tell you fifth intercostal space or located at the apex of the heart. Thinking of all of these things. So now it says one of those. So now we're thinking, all right, sounding like mitral regurgitation, or it could be MVP, right? How do we know it? So a key identifier with MVP, there will be a click heard. You'll hear that click, right? So typically, what you'll hear us say, like it's a mid-systolic click when you're auscultating this, and then if it has led to mitral regurgitation, you'll typically hear that systolic murmur later in the late systolic phase. But for testing purposes, what you need to know for mitral valve prolapse is that it is a systolic murmur. You're going to either see the word mitral, you're going to either see fifth intercostal space for the location or apex for the location. The sound key identifier is click. You will hear a click. That's the key identifier with this one. Now, I promise you, if that's on the exam, they're going to use those key identifiers. Know them. Okay? Know them. And so here, I just did that as we walked through, talking about those things. So knowing that location, mitral apex, fifth intercostal space, it is a systolic murmur. We will hear the sound click, right? And that's all. I want you to take a moment to listen to the murmur video as well as I go into all of those for the diastolic, systolic, and give the scenarios. I'll do some questions this week as well to kind of give you an example of what I mean. If I think of one off the top of my head, let's say patient presents to the office, you're auscultating heart and lung sounds. Murmur, it'll say like systolic murmur noted on exam at the apex of the heart. Nurse practitioner notes a click uh, on auscultation. She documents on exam what would be the best diagnosis for this type of murmur, you know? And so clearly that would be mitral valve prolapse. It had all the things, right? So it'll be things of that nature that you would have to identify. You know what I'm saying? So again, Know if it's systolic versus diastolic. Know if it's the fifth intercostal space. Know if it's apex. Know if it's the base of the heart. Know if it's second intercostal space. Know the location. And once you narrow those two things down, those two things, systolic versus diastolic and location, you should be able to tell me what type of murmur it is, hands down, every time, right? Now the grading is separate, and I have videos on that too. But this is to identify um, mitral regurgitation, aortic stenosis, mitral stenosis, aortic regurgitation, and mitral valve prolapse. Okay, use these steps every time, and I guarantee you will get your answers correct. Now, I hope this was helpful. Like I said, I knew this would be a short and sweet video just to answer that question on MVP. If y'all have any other questions, you know I always tell you guys, please feel free to put them in the comments so that I can go over those for you guys. But as always, thank y'all for watching. If you haven't subscribed, it's free to subscribe. Do it so you will be notified whenever I do videos. Please, please, please be sure to put your questions in here, or you can reach out to me either via email, the nursing studio at gmail, the nursing studio 1 at gmail.com, or you can contact the nursing studio office at 803 400 6864 so that I can assist you. But I appreciate you for watching the video and hope that you found it helpful. If you have questions for me, just let me know. But be sure to meet me back here. And tomorrow I will have questions on murmurs so that we can kind of gauge and test your knowledge on those. But take a look. I have done some other videos on murmurs. I've done other questions if you want to just try it out and see until I do the ones for this week. But and I've also, if you change your settings to playlist, you'll see where I have broken it down on the page into playlists to kind of help you navigate through the 150 plus questions, 150 plus videos, so that they're more categorized. I tried to group them together and things of that nature to kind of help you guys go through them a little bit easier, and you'll see where there's some where there's just straight practice questions, etc. So go knock yourself out. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you have any questions. Tell me if you have any videos that you want me to do for you guys and go over. I am happy to do so. But as always, meet me back here. Bye, y'all.